Welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey, where I am joined today by my son, Zach. Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. It's been a while.
It's been. Now, Zach's only actually in the other room, but for technical difficulties, we've decided to do it.
The Wi-Fi is that bad.
So what we're going to talk about today is something that I've had a few conversations around lately, which is when you come to breakups and there's children involved, kids involved, about how the kids take it, how they view it. And obviously there's a lot of people that the main reason they stay together is for the kids, and they're worried about splitting up. And a lot of people do stay in unhappy relationships for the benefit of the children. So Zach was 6 when his mother and myself went different ways. And so I wanted to get Zach's opinion, ask Zach a few questions about his memories about it. I don't want him to hold any punches. My relationship with Zach is he's probably my best friend. We live together. It's like having a roommate. You probably want to say something now as well, mate, didn't you?
We don't have enough time, Dad.
Painful. Okay. Well, we'll just pretend I'm going to actually dub in that you actually said the same as me as well, so you haven't got a choice. So, but your memories from when you were 6, what were they?
I think it's difficult when you sort of reflect. Because I think probably if you ask me this question, sort of 10 versus 14 versus 17 versus now 23, I feel like your perspective, but also how you reflect on probably those experiences changes. So I do think it's quite objective in terms of maybe the personality or the person you are at the time. I'm obviously speaking now as 23, looking back, it is hard to sort of, in terms of memories, you are very young. It's hard to sort of reminisce about sort of the intricacies, and there's probably a lot you miss because you're not old enough to understand it. What I would say I remember in terms of sort of the sort of separation, if you will, is probably just a lot of the logistics. I think you're almost like an every parcel. You just manifest it between both parents, sort of meeting. Then you'd have like sort of. I mean, I was very lucky where we didn't have set weekends all the time, but just sort of navigating both parents. I think where I was quite young, I didn't have to do that as much because you're not mature enough to do it in terms of the intricacies of relationships and that sort of aspect, which I think maybe if I was a teenager would have been slightly different. But yeah, I think that was the main thing, just sort of the knock-on effects in terms of just logistics. Really, it just makes things a bit more complicated, as you would think.
So did you enjoy having sort of 2 houses at times, or were there times when it was a bit of a pain in the arse?
I think I mean, again, I'm going to be answering these questions from my perspective now. I feel that is absolutely nothing, and I truly believe that people who sort of build that up, and it must be half the parents, because I guess you overthink everything. But having 2 houses, I mean, I personally loved it. I mean, obviously I had nan and grandmas as well. So I'm shuffling between 3 houses, 3 different homes, which I loved. I don't feel, everyone's different, but I don't feel that attached to a house. I feel that attached to sort of my family, and that for me is my home. So I feel that can move elsewhere. I mean, I love the fact where I speak to people, some of my best friends have sort of had the same family home since they've been born, or like 4 or 5, where I've lived in so many different houses, areas. I love it, to be honest. I feel it's a great sort of aspect, sort of not character building, but I think it's a great experience to have. And I feel that people who sort of almost fear having to do that, it's absolutely nothing. I mean, I just feel lucky that I had 2 parents that obviously would do anything for me, who thought the world of me, and I just felt, I now obviously feel privileged to have that at 6, opposed to sort of crying and maybe getting upset the world's against me that I have 2 homes. I feel it's not a big deal in the grand aspect of things.
I think that's one of the main points, and it's all to do with your personal view on it. But for me, I think there's 2 separate things that for people that are maybe considering, children within a relationship. I think having children with someone and having a relationship with someone are 2 different things. If the relationship breaks down, you don't stop being a parent with them for your child. And I think that's the thing that people think it's going to affect. And a lot of the time it does do, because I think that people let the emotions of the relationship cross over into the parental side of things, and then sometimes you see that children are being used as almost like a currency to get back at the other person, as opposed to
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
as
Yeah,
opposed
causing friction.
yeah, as opposed to, look, that me and you are here, that hasn't worked, but me and you are with our kids or a child. We can still make this work. Did you have any, like, what were the negative things that you found that, like, I might have done that you thought, oh, Dad, like, don't do that, or was there anything on that side that might hurt me if you tell me, but being like brutally honest?
I feel that it's maybe the hardest part juggling, and again, I think it depends on the parents, is probably the relationship aspect, in terms of once each parent begins to start their own relationships, whether that be a few years or almost a lot of years. I feel that's the biggest thing. um Especially depending on how the relationship ends. Obviously, yourself and mum weren't married, so some couples are married and then maybe one's divorced the other, one's left for the other, so there's different feelings there. I feel that was the hardest thing to navigate personally, whether it was you or mum, sort of building a new relationship or seeing new people, maybe when one was, one wasn't. And that's where I thought that tension was sometimes difficult and it's hard to navigate, especially when I feel when it was just me, you're sort of more isolated in terms you don't have a brother or sister you can pass the baton to, or the first in line, the eldest in charge. When it's just one, I feel there's just much more attention. So probably relationships are a big aspect, because it must be difficult when you're sort of on the hand, and then your ex is sort of doing things with their new partner, and then you have sort of the kid just shuffling. So I feel that was a big aspect for me, particularly like teens. It was more difficult. But in
In
terms of
what way? In what way in your teens?
just in terms of, say, you started seeing someone for mum, sort of maybe thinking, oh, like, I don't want Zach having maybe a better relationship or thinking less of me, which obviously would be ludicrous, or vice versa with you. Maybe if mum had a new boyfriend, you're thinking, oh, is it going to be dad number two? And I feel with some, especially people who remarry, maybe that's something that goes through an ex's head, where you think, oh, I don't then building a better relationship than what we had. And maybe you have jealousy as a factor. But yeah, I feel that that's probably a common one to navigate that can be quite difficult, particularly if the new partners don't like each other, and if that makes sense, sort of who they've met then doesn't like the ex. Lucky I didn't really have that as much. But no, another probably hard one to navigate, and this is sort of objective again, but I'd say a hard one to navigate is if the you don't speak. So for me, sometimes it's difficult where I got a little bit older, and say you and mum don't speak. It's then maybe sometimes tough to navigate, particularly before you get to sort of, let's say, adulthood, where you're sort of doing things. Let's say 18, maybe you can drive. You have that little bit more freedom. That's sometimes tough to navigate because you're constantly playing the middleman. You're trying to sit on the fence if there's any disputes. Yeah, I'd say that's one thing that maybe for a lot of kids that they'd probably pull up, where if you're trying to sit on the fence and play both sides, it's hard to not get vested in either or. Yeah, that's quite
Yeah,
difficult.
I'm very big on, I think, if anyone, that you only get one dad, you only get one mum. So I've always been sort of very firm belief, probably from my own experience as being a kid as well. So you don't want anyone coming in to try and take the place of someone. I think if anyone else
No,
comes in your life, they can be a good friend, and they can be someone else that you maybe get another opinion of, but they're never going to replace your mother or your father, for good or bad, because you're only going
yeah,
to get one of
definitely.
those. Do you think I mean, you was, like I said, you were 6. So do you think your experience
Yeah.
of this would have been different if you was older? And did you have friends when you were older that went through this that you saw sort of a different experience for?
I feel my experience would definitely have been different, particularly as if I was a teen, I think it would have been a bit different, because I would have been a bit more independent and probably a bit more confident to have my own views and opinions, and just little bit more mature in terms of understanding context, sometimes what's going on. Maybe why is my mum or why is my dad getting annoyed here? Why is mum getting upset there? I think you have a better understanding of context, although you're still very young as a teen. You do have a better understanding of how things work. You obviously can gauge relationships to a degree. So I definitely would have helped in some ways. In terms of friends, I don't know. I mean, most of my friends' parents are married, happily married. I think for most of mine, which is quite rare in some cases. But I do know some people from school where their parents got divorced, and I think for some people it really affected them. But what, in my opinion, in some of the cases where potentially they didn't take it too well, I think the kid was more upset at the idea of their parents divorcing opposed to the actual reality of them divorcing. I feel it's more the idea of, oh, they're not going to be together. How's this going to impact me? And they probably overthink things, and when really the reality could be absolutely fine, and ironically it's probably in most cases for the best, and it will have the best effect on the kid, because then you can have maybe potentially two happy parents instead of none or one, you know. So I feel for kids it's probably sometimes overthinking the idea of the breakup opposed to the reality of the breakup and what it will entail. But I haven't actually known too many that have gone through divorce at sort of my age, like 20s. But I think you're probably, once you're independent, you're probably not that fussed. I think, particularly past 18, you can probably get an idea if your parents are in a good place, even if they're married. I know some friends who their parents, I don't know if they're happily married or not, but maybe when I don't think the kids are silly, they can gauge that themselves. Um, I definitely think it depends on age and sort of how mature you are to how you gauge it and how you take
Yeah,
things.
I mean, that was one of the things I was going to talk to you about, actually, because say the scenario was like your mother and myself were still together, and then your mum came to you now and went, look, Zach, I've got to tell you that, I've been unhappy for years and years and years. Your dad, as you know, is complete Wally. Yeah,
Twat.
thank you. We're going to go that hard. But, and like, would you go, would you think, because I always think that maybe the kids would go, well, you should have left ages ago. Because if your mum said, look, I've only ever stayed because of you, what do you think now would be your reaction to that?
Yeah. Again, that's a really good question. I think that'll be dependent on your character and how you answer. Personally, if that was your mum who came to me and said, look, I've been really unhappy for years, I'm now potentially thinking about leaving, or I'm going to leave, I'd be really upset. I'd be deeply upset. And why would I be upset is I'd be gutted that you, or say my mum, had not wasted but thrown away years of your life. Because even now at 23 and I'm still a baby, but I think life's so precious, and sometimes people think, oh, it's so cliche, but it really is. And whether that's 20s where some people think, oh, it's your best years, or 30, 40, everyone's living a lot longer. One's sort of experiences are becoming a much bigger factor for everyone in terms of consumer behavior, what we enjoy in life, the pleasures in life. And I just think you can't take life for granted. So I think, yes, maybe you think you're doing right by your kids, and in that sense, no one's ever going to take back what they've done or have any regrets. But I do think life's so precious, and sometimes you just have to be bold and make decisions that you may not feel but you know is right. And if you have a great relationship with your kids, they'll be okay, because you're not that person isn't going to stop being a great parent, are they? So I think even if you go through a divorce and leave, you're still going to turn up for your kids if you have that relationship. So it's not going to stop you being a good parent or them being happy, because you're still going to do all the same things you do for them anyway. It just means that maybe it's two separate houses or weekends, or there's just a bit more logistics and a bit more sort of separation. But if it's going to result in two happier parents, then I think it's for the best. And my parents' happiness personally is so important. I mean, as a kid, like I said, once you get older, you want the best for your parents as well, because 30, 40, 50, you're still living your life and there's so many things you can do. So I'd be gutted if I found out that my parent had essentially felt like inside they'd been throwing away years of their life just to make me happy. Because I also think that puts a massive burden on me, where potentially the kid, you can end up feeling guilty, like you're a sort of a burden to your parent then. So I'd hate that to be the case, if I'm
Do you,
honest.
do you think there's any good? Like, there's never a good age, is there? But do you think that
Yeah.
there's ever a good time or a bad time, or the right time is when you feel it's the right time because you're not happy anymore?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I believe probably a bit like having a breakup, I guess, or leaving a job, or I don't know. I don't think there's ever sometimes, or maybe having a kid as well. I don't feel like personally there's ever a great time sometimes. I think you can always maybe make excuses, delay, push back, find a reason not to. And maybe that's your self consciousness telling you, or you're sort of afraid of actually doing it and taking that step. So I personally think that once you sort of have those feelings and you've thought about it, maybe reflected on it and think, what will the impacts be? Will this make me happy? More importantly, I think it's probably the best time to do it. And I don't think there's a right time for the kids. Maybe at some point, obviously a parent knows their kid better than anyone. They'll maybe know how mature they are and how they'll take it. But at the end of the day, I go back to it. I'd hate to think when I'm older that my parents thrown away years of not being happy just for the sake of me, when I would have been fine. They would have been fine. So I'd still have the parent
Yeah,
there.
I think that that's the really important thing. And I've got to say that the one thing that your mum was great at was that she was always happy if you was happy. So
Yeah, she
so
is.
like if it was when it came to Christmases, if she knew you wanted to be somewhere because that was going to make you happy, she was quite happy with you going, I want to go there because she knew that you were going to be happy there. And at times that I think that's what you need to be as a parent. You need to be selfless because it's not about whether your kids are with you; it's whether your kids are actually happy. And because it's got to still be about them. Obviously you want that relationship to work, and also
Yeah.
what I'm not saying is that as soon as you get problems in a relationship, if you're married with kids, you should bail out straight away because I think
No,
you
no, no.
should try for everyone concerned. But if you keep repeatedly ending up back in the same situation again and again and again, and your mental health is to a point where it starts to get affected, which that can happen quite easily. I think then it's time that you realize that you're a parent first and foremost, both of you. And that is a lot harder when you're the one that doesn't want the relationship to end. I've got to say, if you're the person that doesn't want the relationship to end, it is all a lot harder. And then that becomes really difficult to sort of think, right, I've got to do the right things by the kids here. It's two separate things. Like I'm a parent and this relationship hasn't worked for the other person. So it is really hard battling that. And I think probably protecting your emotions from the kids as well, because you're going to be hurt about the relationship and you don't want that overspilling into the kids. And I don't know if you ever experienced that at any time at all.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I was very lucky, but that must be difficult in terms of, say it's not amicable, or everything's not always gonna end on the best play in the best place. So I feel it's probably hard for parents not then, maybe they do separate, not almost showing your emotions too much in front of your kids in terms of the other partner, because it'd be very easy. And I know some cases where there's been separations from people I know where the kids end up choosing a parent because maybe it's been sort of they've cheated, or parents just been closer with one of the kids, and then you end up essentially getting the kids choosing sides, not to use the term, but essentially sort of whether that's living with one of the parents, being a lot closer with one of the parents. It's hard, I guess, because ideally you don't want that, do you? You want to be close to both your parents, but sometimes obviously people are
Yeah,
are
I
closer with
think that
one.
falls on the parents as well. I think sometimes even if you may not get on with like the other partner, I think sometimes you have to see past that. And if your child is being a bit disrespectful, or they are choosing sides, you sort of pull them up on it and say, look, you've got to spend time with your mum or time with your dad. What goes on between me and your dad, me and your mum, that's our business. But we're
Yeah,
both parents to you. So I think first and foremost, that is it. It's the child that should be the centre of it. You shouldn't be using the child for your own hurt and your own revenge on someone. And I think unfortunately that can happen quite a bit.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's probably quite common. It's very hard to take your emotion out. It's very difficult, probably.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think there's probably lots of people out there that are considering, maybe they're not happy, but because there's children involved. But, like I've said, I think you try everything else first. But I thought today would be good just to hear sort of a child's version of it, especially reflecting back now. And I think that's the biggest point that you make. It's when you're older, and I think that's the thing that people need to think about, is like when kids are older, they're going to understand a lot more, about what goes on and what relationships are like. Because when you're young, you don't have that experience of relationships, do you?
No, and I don't feel you probably remember it that much, unless it's something that sort of impacted you that much, and maybe like a death or something worse. But a separation, I feel you'll remember more how you reflect on it in the stories you're told when you're sort of a late teen, probably, and you have that understanding, opposed to when you're maybe a small kid, less than 10,
Yeah.
or just going into sort of late primary school, and then you might say a few things not meaning it or not understand it, and then 5 years later that's when you'll really reflect on it and think about it and sort of form your opinion, which will then probably last. So I think, I mean, particularly under 10, I mean, you're just so young, like primary school kids, you don't have a clue, do you? I know, maybe I don't, because I'm still young, but you have a better idea about things and you can listen and form your own opinion, which really, as a child, it's very hard to do. You're easily swayed, you're easily influenced, aren't you? And you don't really have an
Yeah,
understanding of different
and I
factors
found
in
with
life.
kids, and not in a bad way, but essentially, kids are quite selfish. Like
Yeah,
their sort of emotions are about them. They just want them to be happy, and if they're happy, they don't really care about what else is going on. But they know if they're not
yeah,
happy, they do care about their parents, but it's in a very surface level way. If they're doing something that they want to do, they're absolutely fine. And I think that's the key to it: is both making sure that you're good parents and you're doing what's best for the kids, because kids will get upset when what they want to do is impacted. So if one person's sort of saying, well, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that with them because I don't want to do that, because that affects the kids, that's when they'll go, I'm not happy about the divorce. The divorce is
yeah,
affecting me, because what they're saying is it's just affecting what they want to do, because they're not getting what they want to do
yeah,
anymore. And I think that's the thing: as you get older, you also start to learn that for every situation, there's two points of view, and neither one of them is right, and neither one of them is particularly true. The truth is probably different for both people involved, and you become a lot more balanced, I think, about your understanding as well.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it'll continue to change as you get older as well.
Well, listen, mate. Thank you for jumping on with me and speaking honestly. I'm always very proud when I hear you speak. You speak incredibly well. Don't know where you get that from, but guys, hopefully this. If you're in this situation, and like I say, listen to Zach and him reflecting back, hopefully there's some stuff in there that might get you asking questions that will lead you to an answer that is good for you. And we all have different answers as well. We're all completely different. I don't think when I listen to people giving advice, it's just opinions. And if those opinions help you, then great. If not, and they're not for you, then so be it. But once again, thank you for joining Fizz Chase and Gray. Thank you for listening. Again, thank you, Zach. And make sure you subscribe and follow. Take care. We'll catch up soon. Bye-bye.